Fantastic. So, founded in 1980 by a mother whose daughter was killed by a repeat drunk driver, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, otherwise known as MADD, is the nation's largest nonprofit to end drunk driving, help fight drugged driving, support the victims of these violent crimes, and prevent underage drinking. In our research, we have learned that one of the best ways to prevent impaired driving is by educating young people about the dangers and the consequences of underage substance abuse. By getting today's youth off to a good start, we are taking a giant step towards fulfilling our vision of a nation without impaired driving. That's why we are focused on tackling underage substance abuse, a problem that threatens your safety and endangers entire communities. Every day, about 32 people in the US dies in drunk driving crashes. That's one person every 45 minutes, which means by the time we finish this presentation, this problem will take another life. That's why it is so important we act now. We want you to leave here today thinking about what you want out of your future and decide that alcohol, cannabis, and other substances shouldn't have a place in your life today. Next slide. Before we get started, I would love to see what you all know about alcohol, cannabis, and medications. So if you have your phone available or another electronic device, please feel free to scan the QR code. I'll give you a minute to answer a quick 3-question survey. All right, next slide, please. So before we get into all the reasons why you shouldn't drink alcohol or use other substances, it's important that we educate you completely on what those substances are, how they are processed by your body, how they will affect your brain, and why they are so dangerous. So let's start by diving into alcohol. Next slide, hopefully, please. Perfect. So alcohol or ethanol is an intoxicating ingredient that's found in beer, wine, and liquor. Alcohol is a drug that depresses the entire body. As alcohol levels get higher, your breathing and your heart rate slows down and can ultimately even stop. Alcohol may come in many different forms, from the lower alcohol by volumes, or ABV for short, of beer and seltzers to the higher forms like liquor. But what does that really mean? Before we get into it, I want to ask you all a quick question. Is beer or wine less dangerous to drink than hard liquors like vodka or tequila? If any of you want to come off of mute or put in the chat what you think that answer is, let me know. If not, we can kind of get right into that there.
No, I think it's just as dangerous.
And that is correct. So the answer is no. One 12-ounce beer has the same amount of alcohol as one 5-ounce glass of wine and one 1.5-ounce shot of liquor. So it is the amount of alcohol consumed that affects a person most, not the type of alcoholic drink. That is what we refer to as alcohol by volume, or ABV. So even though hard liquor is technically stronger per liquid ounce, it's not only less dangerous to consume a beer versus a mixed drink. However, shots are dangerous because that same amount of alcohol is absorbed in your bloodstream much faster than if a person drinks, or if a person takes 20, 30, or 40 minutes to finish a glass of beer. But what you need to know is that impairment begins when there is any amount of alcohol in your system, and it is never safe when you are underage. Next slide, please. Binge drinking is a pattern of drinking when someone consumes 4 to 5 or more drinks in 2 hours. Think about all the movies that you've seen where there is a party. What are they oftentimes doing? They're playing beer pong, they are taking shots, they are chugging from bottles. The reason that this is so dangerous for youth is because the developing body processes alcohol different than the adult body. Despite this, we know from studies that when teens do drink underage, they are far more likely to binge drink than adults are. Teenagers get drunk twice as fast as adults, but have more trouble knowing when to stop. Binge drinking is unfortunately so normalized despite how deadly it can be. Why do you think that is? As mentioned earlier, oftentimes it's seen in movies, it's seen on TV, that make it normalized, that make it seem like it's okay when it's really not. Next slide, please. So what is the risk with binge drinking? It is far more deadly than just a bad hangover. An alcohol overdose occurs when there is so much alcohol in the bloodstream that areas of the brain controlling basic life support functions begin to shut down. Some symptoms you'll see on your screen of alcohol poisoning include mental confusion, difficulty remaining conscious, vomiting, trouble breathing, dulled responses such as no gag reflex, extremely low body temperature, slow heart rate, seizure, clammy skin. Next slide, please. Alcohol overdose can lead to permanent brain damage, or even in some cases, it can lead to death. If you are ever in a situation where you suspect that someone might be overdosing on alcohol, it is imperative to call 911. We hope that you will never find yourself in this situation, but we also don't want you to make the mistake of letting someone just sleep it off, only to realize that they needed life-saving care. So the first thing, again, you should do is call 911 to get the paramedics to you and to this individual as quickly as possible. In the meantime, while the paramedics are on their way, we want you to know how to put this individual in what is called the recovery position. So while the person is lying down, we want you to raise the individual's arm that's closest to you, straight above their head, straighten the leg that is closest to you, bend the other leg at the knee, and bring the other arm across the chest as seen in this picture. Gently roll the person towards you and tilt their head so that way you're maintaining an airway. You want to tuck the nearest hand under the cheek, which will help keep their head lifted. This will help make sure that the person does not choke if they were to aspirate or vomit. You never want to leave this individual alone while the paramedics are on their way, again, to ensure that they don't choke or seize. This is a life or death scenario that you never have to experience if you avoid being in a situation where underage drinking or other risky behaviors occur. Even if you're at a party and you are the one making the responsible choice to not drink, you can still unfortunately find yourself in this scary and traumatic situation if others are the ones drinking. Next slide, please. So underage drinking is not only against the law, but it is dangerous, which is why we're asking you to take a stand against underage drinking and other substance use. So next, I'm going to be talking about cannabis. So what do you know cannabis as? I'm going to take a quick poll. Again, feel free to raise your hand, put it in the chat, come off mute. But what have you heard cannabis called before? Have you heard it maybe as weed? Have you heard it referred to as pot, grass, any other names you can think of? Again, feel free to come off mute or put it in the chat. But at the end of the day, all of these names are referring to the same thing, and that same thing is the substance that is called cannabis, which is the dried flowers and leaves of the cannabis plant. It contains THC, which is that mind-altering compound that produces the high that we all kind of know or are aware of when it comes to folks using this substance. In addition, because I was about to get ahead of myself there, so let me backtrack. In addition to all the names, there are many different ways that people use cannabis. Most oftentimes, you maybe think of folks smoking weed. Folks also can eat cannabis as well as vape cannabis. So although it comes in many different shapes and sizes, from the green flower bud or smoked in pipes and joints, to the highly concentrated wax and oils that is used in the vape pens, to the synthetic compounds, all forms and all methods of consumption are incredibly dangerous for youth. Impairment, again, begins when any amount of cannabis has been consumed. Next slide, please. So no matter your opinion on legalization, the fact is that it is illegal in all states for anyone under the age of 21 to use cannabis recreationally. Despite being known as a natural substance, underage cannabis use is dangerous. And although some states, like Delaware, have passed laws to legalize recreational cannabis, this does not mean it's safe for underage use. Again, in fact, in all 50 states, it is a federal law that it is illegal for anyone under the age of 21 to use cannabis recreationally. Some dangers that is associated with this: it can cause permanent IQ loss. It is linked with depression, anxiety, suicide, and psychotic episodes. When paired with driving, it can lead to dangerous and fatal crashes. Cannabis significantly impairs judgment, motor coordination, and reaction time. And studies have found that there is a direct relationship between blood THC concentration and impaired driving ability. Next slide, please. So the last substance I'd like to talk about is actually something that everyone here has in their house, and that is medications. Next, perfect. So for the last, almost 40 years, 45 years now at MADD, we have worked with young people, educating you all about the dangers of alcohol. And in the last few years, we've included information about cannabis as popularity rose, as states changed their laws. And now the unfortunate reality is that in the US, we are experiencing an unprecedented epidemic of prescription drug overdose deaths. So it is imperative that you all know just how dangerous medications can be when they are misused. While we don't have time today to cover every single drug that exists out there, we do want to take the time to remind you of some important precautions to take that will help keep you safe. So as you can see here on your screen, you never want to take a prescription medication that was prescribed for someone else, nor do you want to share a medicine that was prescribed for you with someone else. You never want to take more than what is prescribed by your doctor or ignore instructions for your medications. Always, always, always please follow your doctor's orders. You also never want to mix medications with alcohol or drugs, nor do you want to ride with someone who you suspect is impaired. If you have any questions or concerns about a medication you have been prescribed, again, please always ask your doctor. That brings us to polysubstance use. So polysubstance use is when two or more drugs are consumed at once. Studies show that when teenagers use alcohol and cannabis at the same time, they tend to experience 2 to 3 times more consequences. So again, we think often about how independently alcohol has such dangerous consequences, and cannabis and other substances have such dangerous consequences. But this statistic here shows that when combined, they are dangerous. They are even more dangerous together. So even if you think that mixing substances is okay, it is not. You'll have physical consequences such as hangovers, vomiting, blackouts, again, death in worst cases. And then legal consequences like driving intoxicated that can lead to crashes, again, death, and other things, poor academic performance. Um, tons of negative things, and we'll get into more of the dangers and consequences here on the next few slides. So now that we have defined what these impaired substances are, I would love to open it up to a quick poll. Again, feel free to come off mute, raise your hand, do a little reaction, or put it in the chat. How many of you believe, or how many of you know someone who believes that the minimum drinking age should be lowered from 21 to 18? Anyone?
Oh, definitely. I've heard that many times.
Yes, I do as well. I know my parents um, were around and have lived through the law change when it was 18, now it's 21. And a lot of folks that I talk to every day in my work at MADD oftentimes question why that is 21. So we're going to take a look at some things on the next few slides and watch a video about why this is. So obviously, as mentioned, there are some folks who may not necessarily understand why the federal government has determined that 21 is the age where young people can begin drinking alcohol. And in some states, 21 is the age for cannabis, recreational cannabis use as well. So let's talk about why that is. We are going to take a look at some of the history of the law itself and how we here at MADD helped to get that passed. Next slide, please, is going to show a video. I don't hear any sound with this video. Lynn, you might need to unmute yourself. That might be why. I just realized.
In 1980, after her daughter Carrie was killed by a drunk driver, Madd's goals at the time.
How about if we start it over?
Perfect. Thank you.
Public attention goes to the grassroots campaign of organizations like MADD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, and RID, Remove Intoxicated Drivers.
Candace Candy Lightner founded MADD in 1980 after her daughter Carrie was killed by a drunk driver. MADD's goals at the time included making it easier to obtain DUI convictions and raising the drinking age. This direction was clear at Riverdale High School in Oradell, New Jersey, where President Reagan explained his unpredictable political evolution. The problem?
I appointed a presidential commission on drunk driving. They told us that alcohol-related automobile accidents are the leading cause of teenage deaths in this country.
The theory.
In states in which the drinking age has been raised, teenage driving fatalities have gone down significantly. Here in New Jersey, you raised the drinking age to 21 in 1983. And you know what happened? You had a 26% reduction in nighttime single vehicle fatalities among 19 and 20-year-olds in the first year alone.
The dilemma.
Did it stop?
Yeah, it looked like it paused.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a little play button in the middle of the screen. Like in the middle of the slide. See if that'll restart it. Nope, that started it from the beginning.
Grassroots campaign of organizations like MADD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, and RID, Remove Intoxicated Drivers.
Worst case, that can always sum up.
Lightner founded MADD in 1980 after her daughter Carrie was killed by a drunk driver. MADD's goals at the time included making it easier to obtain DUI convictions and raising the drinking age. This direction was clear at Riverdale High School in Oradell, New Jersey, where President Reagan explained his unpredictable political evolution. The problem?
I appointed a presidential commission on drunk driving. They told us that alcohol-related automobile accidents are the leading cause of teenage deaths in this country.
The theory.
In states in which the drinking age has been raised, teenage driving fatalities have gone down significantly. Here in New Jersey, you raised the drinking age to 21 in 1983. And you know what happened? You had a 26% reduction in nighttime single vehicle fatalities among 19 and 20-year-olds in the first year alone.
The dilemma.
That's the end of it, the video. That's it.
Okay,
It
so
goes- Mhm.
yep, we'll go on to the next slide then, and I'll kind of recap it. So what was the solution then, in that video? Well, MADD helped get the 21 minimum drinking age law passed in all 50 states, which has saved at least 30,000 lives since then. And while some might contest the law, we see it every day, they can't dispute the research that shows that the law itself saves lives on and off the roadway. Did anyone else notice anything from that clip? MADD changed our name from Mothers Against Drunk Drivers to Mothers Against Drunk Driving. So we wanted to acknowledge that we're not against the person, but we are against the action itself, the drunk driving action. Our goal has always remained the same though, and that is to end substance impaired driving. That's why we're here with you today, and talking with you about this topic. Your decision to not drink alcohol or use substances while underage can truly save lives, not just your own, and can help you create the generation, or can help us create the generation that ends impaired driving for good. So again, why 21? Outside of the issue of substance impaired driving, there is also tons of evidence that drinking alcohol or using substances underage is detrimental to your brain and to your body and life in general. So research tells us that drinking or using these substances at a young age leads to the following. You can have mental health disorders, and an increased risk of self-harm or attempted suicide, brain damage and permanent IQ loss, health problems in adulthood, increased risk of addiction, damaged performance in school, legal and financial consequences, and an increased risk of being seriously injured or killed in car crashes. Again, these are just to name a few. Next slide, please. So next, we're going to talk about the health risks that are associated with underage substance use. So underage alcohol and cannabis use leaves damaging lifelong effects on the brain and on your body as a whole. Your organs are growing and changing every single minute. The brain is not fully developed until your mid-20s, meaning that any substance you consume could negatively impact your development. Underage substance use is extremely physically damaging, which is why we always say that the reason you shouldn't drink or use substances is because of biology and not because of maturity. We oftentimes get the question, or the conflicting statement that it's because kids aren't mature, when again, actually it's because of biology. So in this slide here, we're going to take a look at all of the potential damages to your body that alcohol and cannabis can inflict on you. Starting with the lungs, you'll see that some damage includes inflammation, acute respiratory distress syndrome, lung cancer, and chronic cough. To your heart, you can have a stroke, you can suffer from high blood pressure, heart disease, and have a heart attack. And your liver, you can suffer from cirrhosis, hepatitis, liver cancer. And on top of all of this, your mental health could also suffer. So you can have problems with thinking, difficulty thinking, and difficulty with problem solving. You can suffer from depression and anxiety, reduced attention, addiction, learning, and memory problems leading to dementia. So now that you know all of the health risks that you'd be taking each time you drink or use cannabis, let's talk about what exactly is happening in the brain when a young person uses substances. So this here is a depiction of the development of the human brain. You can see from left to right, there is a 5-year-old brain all the way up to a 20-year-old brain. The different colors represent the different levels of maturation and growth. So even the 20-year-old brain you'll see is still developing. But I want you to look closely at the significant amount of development that happens from preteen years to the 20 years of age. Good judgment is considered an executive function of the brain where you develop over time, where that develops over time. So for teenagers, this skill is rapidly developing. Your brain is still under construction, and this area in particular needs time to develop. Your brain is more vulnerable to lasting effects of substances, again, like alcohol, like cannabis, which can attack areas of your brain that stores new information. Damage to this area means that learning and retaining information could be interrupted. So remember, you can take a stand and choose not to drink underage or choose not to use substances underage. Even for young people who have already consumed alcohol, because of how amazing the human brain is, it can start to repair itself. The longer someone continues to drink, however, the harder that will become. So in the second picture that we have here, alcohol, you'll see, can have a long-lasting effect to multiple areas of the brain. You'll see how drinking on a regular basis can damage someone's memory and learning capacity. The brain you see on the right is a heavy drinker. And the brain on the left belongs to a 15-year-old non-drinking male. Their brains were scanned at the same time as they were performing identical memory tasks. You can see that the brain on the left is more active with that color. That color indicates that the areas are working hard to problem solve. Do you notice any difference between the brain on the left and the brain on the right? The brain on the right is much less active. You see a lot less colors, right? So something else to notice is that the heavy drinker, the one on the right, was actually 2 weeks alcohol-free at the time of this scan. So just know that consuming alcohol has a lasting effect on your brain. So that person didn't consume alcohol today, didn't consume alcohol yesterday. That was 2 weeks of being alcohol free, and you'll still see the impairment and the long lasting, well, not impairment, but the long lasting effects that it has on your brain. Next slide, please. We're next going to dive into the consequences that are associated with underage substance abuse. So I know that there's you can actually click one more time because I don't know why the transitions, there we go, not working with one of the pictures here. But in addition to all of the health risks that are imposed on your brain and your body and your development that we just went over, I know it feels like information overload at times. There are also many consequences of underage drinking cannabis and other substance use, such as social and academic, legal and financial, and life-changing. Bad grades or failing scores, impact to your permanent record, a school suspension or expulsion, loss of your scholarship, getting kicked off the school sports team, maybe losing your financial aid or getting kicked out of a school club, those can all be consequences that affect your social and your academic life. Or maybe your friends don't want to hang out with you anymore. That could also impact your social life, right? You have some friends, or you maybe were in the crowd that did want to drink, but you have other friends who didn't, and you can lose some friends because of that. On the legal and financial side, you can find that your driver's license will get suspended. You can lose your after-school job. You can receive expensive fines and legal fees. You might have a criminal record if you decide to get behind the wheel of a car impaired, or just not even if you drive, but if you get caught drinking or using a substance underage. And you may need to take mandated community service hours. And then on the life-changing side of things, there is an increased risk of addiction once you start using alcohol or using substances. It can limit your future job options. You could potentially hurt yourself or others. There's an increased risk of sexual violence or unsafe sex or unplanned pregnancies. There's permanent IQ loss and brain damage that can happen. And as mentioned, death can ultimately happen as well. We're going to head to the next slide to begin talking about some safe driving practices. So here at MADD, we want you to ultimately be educated and empowered now as young people, and especially as you become drivers on the road. And this is how we will create a world ultimately where there is no more impaired driving. Impaired driving doesn't exist. That is our goal. So I really want us to talk about this and what matters. So I know we have some teens here on the call today. Again, feel free to put it in the chat, come off mute, raise your hand. How many of you have your license already, or have your permit, or hope to get your license here shortly? No worries. Quiet crowds. We're used to them sometimes. That's okay. But anyway, getting behind the wheel for the first time is super excited. I personally remember the first time that I got my learner's permit, and then the first time I got behind the wheel with my license and no one was in the car with me. It's exciting, right? You have that sense of freedom. But with that freedom also comes a sense of responsibility. You have your own life in your hands, but you also have the life of those around you, whether you have a passenger or two in your car, whether it is the car driving in front of you, behind you, on the opposite side of the road, whether it's folks on bicycles, folks walking on the sidewalk. There's a whole community of people that once you become a driver, that you are ultimately responsible for, that you may not even think about. So with the next slide, we're going to be talking about some driving 101 tips. So again, in the face of all this excitement that you have when you get your license or have that ability to drive, there's also unfortunately some really grim statistics. And unfortunately, as young drivers get comfortable behind the wheel, the risks that they face often grow. So for example, some of these grim statistics include that teenage drivers have a higher rate of fatal crashes than adults do. About 7 teens die every day due to motor vehicle crashes, and hundreds more are injured. Crash risk is particularly high during the first month of when you have your license. 24% of drivers aged 15 to 20 who were killed in fatal motor vehicle crashes had been drinking. And the presence of teen or young adult passengers increase the crash risk, of unsupervised teen drivers. And that risk increases with each additional passenger you have in your car. So let's talk about some ways you can lower the risk of a fatal car crash. You might need to unmute yourself if you don't mind. Perfect.
In fact, car crashes are the second leading cause of death for teenagers in the US. Young people can follow these 5 simple steps to lower the risk of a car crash. First, always wear your seatbelt, no matter where you are in the car. Tragically, seatbelt use is lowest among teen drivers. In fact, the majority of teenagers involved in fatal crashes are unbuckled. Second, eyes on the road, hands on the wheel. That means not using electronic devices, eating, doing your makeup, or messing with a radio. In 2020, 3,142 people were killed by distracted driving. Keep your focus when driving. Third, limit the number of passengers. Research shows that the risk of a fatal crash goes up in direct relation to the number of teenagers in the car. And it's your responsibility when your friend is driving to not distract them by being loud or rambunctious. And fourth, follow the speed limit. In 2019, speeding was a factor in 27% of the fatal crashes that involved passenger vehicle teenage drivers. Lastly, never ride with an impaired driver. An alarming 26% of youth have reported that they are willing to ride with a driver who has been drinking. Remember, it is never worth the risk, and always plan for a safe ride home. Remember, it's illegal to drink under the age of 21, and no driver should ever operate a vehicle impaired.
So unfortunately, you being a safe driver yourself is not enough to guarantee that you will make it home. One of the worst situations that you can find yourself in is if you are in the passenger seat of a car where someone is impaired behind the wheel. So with the next slide, we are going to be talking about best practices when it comes to being with an impaired driver. So again, here's the thing. Many people think that driving after using cannabis is not as bad as drunk driving. People often find that, oh, cannabis relaxes me, it makes me feel better, right? I know I hear that a lot. I'm sure folks in the medical community hear that a lot. But in fact, that this is a myth. There are studies that show that drivers with THC in their blood were roughly twice as likely to be responsible for a deadly crash or to be killed than drivers who hadn't had substances or alcohol in their system. You need to understand that drunk driving and drugged driving are both extremely dangerous and too often have deadly consequences. If there's anything that I want you to take away from this presentation that I'm sure the Medical Society of Delaware team wants you to take away from this situation, is that it's to never ride with an impaired driver. Impairment begins, again, I feel like I've said this a handful of times in this presentation. You all might think I sound like a broken record at this point, but impairment begins truly when there is any amount of alcohol, any amount of cannabis, any amount of any mind-altering substance that is present in your system. If someone feels different, they are going to drive different. And at MADD, we dedicate our presentations to the lives of those that have been lost to substance-impaired driving. And tonight, we want to honor the lives of Jed and Cole by sharing their stories with you quickly. So if you go to the next slide, please. We're gonna talk about Jed just quickly for a minute, where after a night of drinking, he was with a friend who wanted to drive home, and Jed unfortunately could not convince his friend to not drive. So Jed had the best of intentions, and he hopped in the car to try and help. When unfortunately the car crashed and Jed did not survive, but his friend who was impaired and behind the wheel did. Next slide, please. So with Jed in mind, and there are countless of other victims and survivors and other stories that I could spend hours telling you about, I mostly want to focus on a couple of things that get you all home safe. In 2025, we have so many options at our fingertips. One, you can call or text a parent, a guardian, aunt, uncle, cousin, friend, to come pick you up. If you feel unsafe or you don't have a ride because the person you are with has been drinking or using drugs, please always try and call someone. I think there's always a fear. And I have young nieces and nephews who are about to enter high school. And as an aunt, I find responsibility of trying to teach them right to make right choices. And I'd rather know that they are safe, and I'm not going to get mad at them for calling me at 2 a.m. if they need a ride. And I feel confident that many other parents, guardians, and friends will feel the same way. We want you guys home safe, right? Find a safe ride home. We live in a world where there's Uber, there is Lyft, taxis still exist. Some of you might not know what a taxi is. I'm not sure. With new generations, with recent generations. And then this one here can get tricky and might scare some people. But calling 911 to report a friend who is driving impaired, you might lose that friendship. That friend might be very, very mad at you. They might suffer legal consequences, financial consequences, all of the things that we talked about earlier in this presentation. But at the end of the day, calling 911 can save their life and can save other people's lives. So is it worth risking a friendship in order to save their life and other people's lives, to make sure that they get off that road, and the paramedics, the cops, the EMTs, the first responders get them off that road before they injure themselves or injure others? Yes, I hope the answer to that is yes. And again, we want to ensure that you never ride with an impaired driver. If you suspect someone might be impaired, say something. If you don't feel comfortable saying something, shoot a text message, make a call out, away from them, just to try and get yourself in a safe spot. Because with all of us, impairment can end here. We can live in a world where there is no impaired driving, whether that's alcohol, drugs, other substances. And we hope that this is the next generation to do that. So with that, I think the next slide here is actually just opening up to questions and discussions. So I think there were a few things that popped up in the chat. So I can take a look at that. Let me see. All right, I'm going to read this one. It's not a popular question, but considering that many European countries set their minimum driving age at 18, which aligns more closely with maturity of the prefrontal cortex responsible for decision-making and impulse control, has Matt ever considered advocating for raising the driving age in the US to 18 or higher? This could potentially reduce risky behaviors. That is a fantastic question. And I don't want to say no or say yes or give the wrong answer. I know our focus has mostly been so far on the on BAC. We were a big proponent in getting the BAC lowered to 0.08. Now we are pushing to have that down to 0.05. I don't believe we have ever advocated for the law to increase the age, but I'm happy to find that out and get the actual answer for you and report back in an email to Lynn and the team that can share that with everybody, because that is a fantastic question that I don't know, but I will get you the answer. What is a good dialogue we should be having with our teenagers to get them engaged and have it be meaningful? That is a very good question as well. And in my experience through MADD and through having nieces and nephews who are pretty close to like children to me at this point, who are 13, 14 years old, it's tough. It is, I'll be honest, it's a very tough conversation to have. But I think being as transparent as possible is always a good way to start. I know you don't want to necessarily scare them, right? This presentation that I just did have a lot of real consequences, right? We showed a lot of statistics, and a lot of that is dreary and gloomy. But I think having open and honest conversations with teenagers about, what their friends are up to. And again, I'm not trying to give any sort of parenting advice either. So let me preface with that, but just trying to be more involved in knowing without being accusatory or questioning what their actions are. I think would be a good way to find out what's going on in their world with their friends, what they might be involved in. And then again, we have plenty of resources here at MADD that we are happy to share out, and it's a great way to become engaged. I don't know right now if there are any local SAD chapters in any of our Delaware high schools. That is one thing that we're hoping to bring back to the schools in Delaware, to again get teenagers more engaged. I hope that answered your question. If it didn't, please let me know. Next question, will you please elaborate on why the risk of a crash increases with more teens in the car? Yeah, so with this one, oftentimes they pose more of a distraction, right? The more friends you have in the car, the more teens you have in the car, the more voices, the more opinions, it poses a distraction. It's kind of similar to the radio, kind of similar to your phone. There is that threat of a distraction. And what is the other word I'm looking for? Influence, peer pressure as well. So there's a bunch of different variables that come into play when you have teenagers in the car. I know some states, and I haven't been in Delaware for very long, so you all can correct me if I'm wrong. I've only been here for a little over a year. But I know I grew up in Pennsylvania, and when you first got your driver's license, it was a junior's driver's license, and you could only have one additional person in the car with you that was under the age of 18. So I don't know if Delaware is the same, but I know that states often have these limits because they recognize the increases of distractions, of peer pressures, that increase that risk of crashes. Is MADD advocating for the HALT Act, which would require alcohol detection systems in all new vehicles? And if so, yes. So that is a huge part of our advocacy, work right now on a national level at MADD. The law was passed, it just has not been enacted. So with this new group of legislators that just came in this past cycle in November of 2024 and leading into some of these special elections and the world of politics, this is a very big focus of MADD's policy and advocacy efforts in 2025. The one question here, the HALT Act, it is alcohol detection systems that would be put into new cars. So what this technology would do is you would start your car. This technology would be able to detect if someone is impaired. If that person is impaired, you would not, the car then would, the ignition would interlock. So it would not be able to, you would not be able to drive, which is fantastic. So we're trying really, really hard on a national level. And I can share more information out after this to Lynn and the team at Medical Society of Delaware to share with you all specifically on the HALT Act. I know for our 45th anniversary of the organization in September, we will be down in DC, getting in front of legislators again, to try and push that into legislation. Again, it has been passed, it just has not been enacted yet. So we're working hard with our partners at NHTSA to get that passed. are impaired accidents decreasing since Uber popularity? That is a fantastic question that I don't have statistics on right now. I can go back to my team tomorrow and ask that question. I don't believe we have any statistics, but I also don't want to say no necessarily because we have partnered with Uber on a national level. They are one of our corporate partners, so we can also get statistics from them as well. So I will get back to you on that, Teresa. Great question. Another question. What programs or services does MADD offer to help survivors cope with the aftermath of these strategies, and how does the organization measure? Fantastic question. So we offer a variety of services to folks that are impacted by impaired driving, whether an individual themselves were in a crash or whether someone lost a loved one in a crash. We have victim service specialists throughout the country and here in the Mid-Atlantic region and folks that work with victims in Delaware that provide services such as emotional support, guidance through the criminal justice system and the civil justice system. We accompany victims and survivors to court proceedings. We help them prepare victim impact statements. We refer victims and survivors to a variety of appropriate resources, whether that would be financial, legal, or medical care, and so much more. We do one-on-one support. We have group support. So a lot of times victims and survivors like to share their stories with one another and rally with one another. And these are 100% free to each victim and survivor. I know we're at 6:59, so I'll try and wrap up this question quickly. But with the funding that we received through individual donors, through the events that we put on, through corporate and corporate sponsors and other grant funding that may come in, that allows us to be able to do the work that we do for our victims and our survivors and keep it completely free to them. As far as the effectiveness of these initiatives, a lot of our, I don't want to put a number on it and quote myself here, but a lot of our victim services staff across the organization is grant funded. And for those of you who may not know, any grant funded employees have to meet certain criteria in order to continue to receive funding for us to be able to do our jobs. So we have very strict measures of how many victims we want to help each year, how many programs like this we're going to put on throughout the year. And we can have very detailed meetings, very detailed reports, monthly, quarterly, with our staff, with the organization as a whole, with our grantors, to be able to measure the effectiveness and to see where we can grow as an organization.
Megan, fantastic presentation. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and being so inclusive and taking so many questions. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you for what you do in your organization. This concludes our Obvious Campaign for Kids March series. We deeply appreciate everyone being a part of it. I want to throw a special thank you out to Lynn Robinson and Anjay Arnold. You two have been fantastic for our 4-part series here and keeping it together and even handling all these technical difficulties and things like that. So thank you guys so much. Megan, again, so grateful to you. Some players, Teresa, Angela, Jean, and Trish, thank you guys for being a part of of our lecture series. I think you were the 4-timers for here for sure. Vinny, Nicole, Pam, and Aiden, thank you as well for joining us. If you like this series, give us some feedback. If you don't like it, give us some feedback so we can improve it. Tell us what you want us to hear, and also the timing of these lectures. A little challenging, and we're reaching an audience of teenagers, and a lot of times they're involved in a lot of activities right now, but these lectures are going to the schools, and we have the superintendent of the schools, I forget her name now, that is going to make sure that they get to the great people and the teenagers so that we as a medical society are being able to provide this community service. So we are so grateful to you, Megan, and the others that have presented for us. Thank you for being a part of it. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on this series. I hope you have a great night. I hope you had a lot of information. Have a great Easter coming up and enjoy the spring that's coming. Good night, everybody.
Thank you again. Take care.
Thank you. Good night.